The fog clinging to the River Thames in the summer of 1483 was thick, smelling of salt and damp earth. Inside the White Tower, the highest point of the fortress palace, two boys stood by a narrow window. The elder, Edward V, was 12 years old, a king in name, though never crowned. Beside him was his younger brother, Richard, Duke of York, just 9. They were the son and splendor children of the late Edward IV, heirs to the most powerful throne in Christendom. But as the iron bolts clicked shut on their chamber door that evening, the world outside began to forget them. They were never seen alive again. To understand how the most protected children in England simply evaporated into the stone walls of the tower, one must look at the brutal chess match of the Wars of the Roses. This was not a time of fairy tale kings, it was a time of survival. The king is dead, long live the king. In April 1483, the sudden death of Edward IV plunged England into chaos. He was a tall, charismatic, and hedonistic king who had brought a fragile peace to the land, but he left behind a power vacuum. On his deathbed, he named his brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, as Lord Protector. Richard was a man of the North, pious, a brilliant military commander, and a man whose loyalty to his brother had been legendary. However, the Queen's family, the Woodvilles, were viewed as ambitious upstarts by the old nobility. They wanted to rush the young Edward V to London and crowned him immediately, bypassing Richard's protection. This was the spark that lit the fuse. Richard of Gloucester intercepted the young king's entourage at Stony Stratford. With a cold efficiency that would become his trademark, he arrested the king's Woodville mentors and took possession of the boy. "Do not fear," he reportedly told the weeping 12-year-old. "I am your protector." By May, they reached London. The coronation was set for June. Following tradition, the king-to-be was installed in the Tower of London, at the time a royal residence as much as a prison. Soon after, his younger brother joined him. The bloody path to the throne. Then the narrative took a sharp, dark turn. A theologian named Ralph Shaw stood at St. Paul's Cross and delivered a sermon that shocked the nation. He claimed that the late King Edward IV had been pre-contracted to another woman before marrying Queen Elizabeth Woodville. If true, it meant the marriage was bigamous and the two princes in the tower were illegitimate. They were not princes at all. They were bastards. Within days, Richard of Gloucester was offered the crown. He accepted, becoming Richard III. The boys remained in the tower. At first, they were seen playing in the gardens, shooting arrows and laughing, but as the summer progressed, they were seen less and less. By the autumn of 1483, they had vanished entirely. Rumors began to ripple through the taverns of London. The king has killed his nephews. The murder, theory, and shadow. What happened in those dark rooms? The traditional story, popularized decades later by Sir Thomas More and William Shakespeare, points a finger directly at Richard III. The legend suggests that Richard sent a man named James Tyrrell to the tower. Under the cover of darkness, two assassins, Miles Forrest and John Dighton, allegedly smothered the sleeping boys with feather beds and pillows. Their bodies were said to be buried deep under a staircase at the stair foot. But history is rarely that simple. If Richard killed them, why didn't ye show the bodies? Usually, a usurper wants the world to know the previous heirs are dead to prevent rebellions. Richard did the opposite. He stayed silent. This silence fed a fire that would eventually consume his reign. The challenger, Henry Tudor. While Richard struggled to rule a suspicious kingdom, a new threat emerged from across the English Channel, Henry Tudor. He was a distant claimant to the throne, an exile living in France. He gathered an army of mercenaries and disgruntled English lords. In August 1485, the two sides met at Bosworth Field. Richard III, the last English king to die in battle, fought with desperate bravery. He saw Henry Tudor's standard and charged directly at him, killing Henry's standard-bearer and nearly reaching the Tudor himself. but he was betrayed by his own allies, the Stanley family, who stood by and watched until the last moment before turning their blades on the king. Richard was struck down, his crown falling into a hawthorn bush. Henry Tudor was crowned Henry VII, ending the Middle Ages in England and beginning the Tudor dynasty. The mystery deepens. The pretenders. If the princes were murdered by Richard, the story should have ended at Bosworth, but it didn't. Years later, during Henry VIII's reign, a young man appeared in Ireland claiming to be Richard, the younger of the two princes. His name was Perkin Warbeck. Warbeck was remarkably convincing. He looked like the late King Edward IV. He knew intimate details of the royal court. He was supported by the prince's aunt, Margaret of Burgundy. For 6 years, he haunted Henry VII, leading invasions and sparking revolts. Eventually, he was captured and confessed to being a commoner from Flanders, but many to this day wonder, was he actually the prince that escaped?
The discovery in the walls. The mystery took its most modern turn in 1674, nearly 200 years after the princes vanished. Workmen at the Tower of London were demolishing a staircase leading to the chapel in the White Tower. 10 feet underground, they discovered a wooden chest. Inside were the bones of 2 children. The skeletons matched the ages of the princes, one roughly 12, the other 9. King Charles II, convinced these were his ancestors, had the bones placed in an urn and interred in Westminster Abbey, where they remain today. In 1933, the urn was opened for a brief forensic examination. The scientists concluded the bones belonged to children of the correct ages, and there were signs of bloodstains on the skulls, though modern science suggests this was likely soil staining. However, because the Church of England and the Crown have refused requests for modern DNA testing, we cannot be 100% certain. The modern debate: innocent or guilty? Today, the UK is divided into 2 camps: those who believe Richard III was a child-killing monster, and Ricardians, who believe he was framed by Tudor propaganda. The case against Richard. He had the most to gain. As long as the boys lived, his throne was insecure. He had the keys to the tower. The case for Richard. He was a man of high integrity before 1483. Some suggest the boys died of natural causes. The elder was known to be sickly. Others point to Henry VII as the real killer. If the boys were alive when he took the throne, he would have needed them gone to secure his own shaky claim. The wild card, the Duke of Buckingham, Richard's right-hand man, had access to the tower and may have murdered them to frame Richard and take the throne for himself. A king found in a car park. The story of the princes and Richard III had a stunning epilogue in 2012. Archaeologists in Leicester began digging in a mundane social services car park. They were looking for the lost Greyfriars Priory, where Richard was said to be buried after Bosworth. Against all odds, they found him. A skeleton with a curved spine, scoliosis, and horrific battle wounds was unearthed. DNA testing against living descendants confirmed it. Richard III had returned. In 2015, he was reburied in Leicester Cathedral with the honors of a king. Thousands of people lined the streets. But even as the king was laid to rest, the ghosts of the 2 boys he left in the tower remained. The final silence. Walking through the Tower of London today, tourists passed the bloody tower and the staircase where the bones were found. The air feels heavy with the weight of the unknown. Did they die in their sleep, terrified and alone? Did they escape to live secret lives in the countryside? Or are they still there, woven into the very mortar of the White Tower?
The princes in the tower represent the ultimate historical cold case. It is a story of how power can corrupt even the closest bonds of family, and how the truth can be buried so deep that not even 5 centuries can fully dig it up.